Hello, this is Jonah Rosenblum with Portage County Live. I'll take you through the world of PTC football in 5 minutes or less. Now, let's start with the Portage Trail Conference County Division, which looks as dangerous as ever, particularly if you look at the Southeast Pirates, a team that showed incredible balance in Week 1. They've always been a good running team, but we saw Dylan Rogers really able to throw the ball downfield. He showed a great connection with his receivers, some great timing routes for the Pirates, and so the Pirates do look incredibly dangerous. Same with the Rootstown Rovers. Caleb Kaut, the speedster, looked terrific in his return to high school football, but they were also able to throw the ball, particularly on third down, as Scott Stager was able to find his tight end Nathan Moore, and Nathan Moore might be one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the Portage Trail Conference. Another fascinating team from Week 1 was the Garfield G-Men. This is a team that looks very different than last year. Last year, the G-Men passed the ball a ton behind the big arm of Dalton Fall. Well, in Week 1 against Middlefield Cardinal, the G-Men only passed the ball twice, and yet they still won the game behind 62 rushes, including 23 rushes for 133 yards from Anthony DeNigris and 20 rushes for 134 yards from Ryan Brown. Another team that perhaps looked a little different in Week 1 was the Mogador Wildcats behind Caden Johnson. Caden Johnson, a very electric player, a speedster from the track team who was able to turn a bubble screen into a 55-yard pass downfield. Again, the Mogador Wildcats, normally known as a ground and pound team, but it appears that Caden Johnson might add a different look for the Wildcats and give them a different kind of electricity in 2017. Another interesting team to take a look at, the Coventry Comets, a 49-0 win over Kenmore Garfield in Week 1. The Comets returned 16 starters from last year, including Treyon Sibley, an all-Ohio kind of kid. They also returned Braden Doberman, who had 200-plus tackles last year. One of only two teams to win in the Metro Division in Week 1. The Comets will definitely be an interesting team to watch in 2017. The only other team that won in the Metro Division in Week 1 was the Springfield Spartans. They beat Ellett for the first time since 2010, and that's an Ellett team that went 9-2 last year, albeit they did lose their leading rusher, Marquise Bridges, to graduation. But nonetheless, the Spartans will be an interesting team to watch, one of only two teams that went 1-0 in the Metro Division, and a team that is very talented, especially if Paul Stubbs and Eric Parks. They were a dynamic duo in Week 1. Stubbs throwing to Parks for 2 touchdowns. He went 9 out of 18 for 180 yards. And so entering Week 2, the question is, how good are the Spartans? And we'll get a really good glimpse of that against an Akron East team that went 8-4 last year. Another big matchup, the Rootstown Rovers coming off their convincing victory over Field. They host Conneaut on Friday night. Again, this is a Conneaut team that averaged 25.9 points per game, so certainly a Conneaut team that is effective. They return a lot of their offensive line from last year, including left tackle Tanner Capon. Again, I think the Rovers are favored in this game, but it should be an interesting challenge nonetheless. Another interesting game in Week 2, Woodridge at Nordonia. The Bulldogs looking to get their first win of the season. They are favored against Nordonia to be sure, but again, Nordonia is a Division II team. And a team that features a talented kid in Ty Evans. He's a running back and linebacker who's committed to Ball State. So I do think the Woodridge Bulldogs will be favored, but an interesting test nonetheless. Now, in an all-PTC matchup, the Field Falcons visit the Southeast Pirates. The Pirates are most likely favored in this one. They are such a balanced team. But the Field Falcons are not going to back down against anyone. We saw that in Week 1. A lot of things went wrong early against Rootstown, but the Falcons kept fighting and actually played quite well toward the end of the game. So I think that's a really interesting Week 2 matchup over at Palmyra Township. Now let's get to my top 3 matchups of Week 2. We start with Ravenna at Marlington. Ravenna coming off a heartbreaking loss to Talmadge. This is a near must-win for the Ravens. Now they're playing a very young Dukes team, so a Dukes team that's very hard to predict. A lot of new pieces at the skill positions. And then the question, too, is who's injured and who's not. Trenton Davis missed Week 1 for the Dukes. Garrett Pierce was banged up as well. Apparently, according to the Alliance Review, he should be back at linebacker and getting a lot more repetitions this week. So that's a big development for the Dukes, potentially. My second biggest matchup of the week, Cuyahoga Heights coming off a trip to the state championship game last year, goes to Garrettsville. Again, this is a Cuyahoga Heights team that should be very good once again, with Lucas D'Orazio coming off an 1,000 rushing yard season and 23 touchdowns, and wide receiver Dylan Drummond, who caught 8 touchdowns last year and had 1,000 receiving yards, a big test for the G-Men in Week 2. And finally, Crestwood and Streetsboro, both teams had lopsided losses in Week 1. A huge matchup between these two and a big rivalry, particularly after Pete Thompson left Manaway for Streetsboro last year. I'll be covering that game live for the Record-Courier, and you can catch all of our coverage at record-courier.com.